On February 2nd, 2014, at 11:30 a.m., Philip Seymour Hoffman was found dead on his bathroom floor in a Manhattan apartment. A syringe was still in his arm. Heroin mixed with fentanyl. He was 46 years old, an Oscar winner, with 23 years of sobriety behind him, and 3 children waiting for him to come home. Hollywood called him a genius, but in the end, genius didn't save him. It only made his silence louder. Philip Seymour Hoffman was never supposed to look like a star. No sharp jawline, no heroic posture, no charm Hollywood could sell on a poster. And yet, directors were terrified to stand next to him on set. Meryl Streep once said Hoffman didn't act. He inhabited people. Ethan Hawke called him the most dangerous actor alive because once he entered a scene, no one else existed. In Capote, he didn't imitate Truman Capote. He erased himself. He altered his voice permanently, lost dangerous weight, lived inside the character until the line between performance and identity collapsed. The result, Academy Award for Best Actor, 2006. But what most people never saw was what followed. After winning the highest honor in Hollywood, Hoffman told friends he was more afraid than ever, afraid of failing, afraid of being ordinary, afraid that if the pain disappeared, so would the talent. He chose roles that crushed him. The Master, Doubt, Synecdoche in New York. Characters drowning in control, shame, obsession, because those were the only emotions he trusted. By 2013, after 23 years of sobriety, Hoffman quietly relapsed. No scandal, no headlines, just silence. On February 2nd, 2014, that silence ended on a bathroom floor. The question isn't how Philip Seymour Hoffman died. The question is why a man this gifted believed staying alive was more dangerous than disappearing. Philip Seymour Hoffman did not grow up in chaos, violence, or poverty. There was no dramatic catastrophe, no moment Hollywood could later romanticize. What shaped him was something quieter, slower, and far more dangerous. The feeling of never quite belonging anywhere. He was born in 1967 in Fairport, New York, into what looked like a stable middle-class family. But when Philip was 9 years old, his parents divorced. There were no public explosions, no screaming matches that left scars others could see. There was simply a house that no longer felt whole, and a child who learned very early how to disappear without leaving. Hoffman later said he didn't remember the day his parents separated. What he remembered instead was the sensation that rooms suddenly felt too large, and that he himself had become too small inside them. From that moment on, Philip developed a survival instinct that would define his entire life. Observe rather than be seen. While other children learned how to perform for attention, he learned how to watch from the edges. He absorbed people, their rhythms, their discomforts, their silences. This was not talent yet. It was preparation. At school, Hoffman didn't stand out. He wasn't handsome. He wasn't athletic in a way that drew admiration. He was overweight, awkward, and rarely chosen first for anything. For a while, sports offered him structure. Wrestling, in particular, gave him something solid, rules, control, a sense of grounding inside his own body. Then a neck injury ended it. Suddenly, the one place where he felt anchored disappeared. What replaced it wasn't ambition or dreams of fame. It was a void. And inside that void, Hoffman found acting. The stage was not a place where he shined. It was a place where he could stop being himself. For the first time, Philip didn't need to explain his presence. He was allowed to exist as someone else. That permission mattered more than applause. Acting wasn't an escape from reality. It was a way to survive it. But alongside this discovery came something else: alcohol and drugs. Hoffman began drinking and using substances in his teenage years, not out of rebellion, but out of necessity, not to feel more, but to feel less when emotions became overwhelming. He learned how to mute them. When emptiness crept in, he learned how to fill it temporarily. This wasn't chaos. It was control, and control felt safe. By the time Hoffman entered NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, he wasn't learning how to act. He was learning how to go deeper. While others studied technique, he studied discomfort. While his peers chased attention, he chased emotional truth. Even when it hurt, Professors noticed something unsettling about him. Hoffman could sit with emotions most people instinctively fled from: shame, insecurity, loneliness. He didn't dramatize them. He let them stay. Slowly, a dangerous belief began to form. That pain was not something to overcome, but something to use. That his value came from how much he could endure, and that without that endurance, he might be nothing at all. This is where the questions raised earlier begin to find their answers. Why would a man so gifted fear peace more than destruction? Because peace had never been where he was seen. Silence had. Absence had. Emotional weight had. Hoffman didn't learn how to live with his feelings. He learned how to weaponize them. In acting, this made him extraordinary. In life, it laid a foundation for a quiet, long-term collapse. Long before the Oscar, long before Broadway, long before Hollywood crowned him a genius, there was a boy who learned that being invisible was safer than being known. Philip Seymour Hoffman didn't become an actor to be loved. He became one to be allowed to exist. And that choice, made before anyone was watching, would eventually cost him everything. Philip Seymour Hoffman did not enter Hollywood with a plan to succeed. He entered it with a plan to survive without being erased. While others chased visibility, Hoffman instinctively moved in the opposite direction. He avoided the center, not out of fear, but out of control. The center demanded performance. The margins allowed truth. From the beginning, he understood something most actors learn too late. Fame simplifies people, and he could not afford to be simplified. After graduating from NYU, Hoffman gravitated toward theater and independent film, spaces where imperfection wasn't corrected but examined. He joined the Labyrinth Theater Company, a collective known for raw, uncomfortable storytelling. There, Hoffman was rewarded for being likable. He was rewarded for being honest. The roles he chose were not stepping stones. They were declarations. Lonely men, weak men, men who failed quietly. He didn't search for characters audiences admired. He searched for characters audiences avoided, because those were the ones that felt real to him. Hollywood noticed him, but not in the way actors dream about. Casting directors saw him as that guy, the awkward one, the unsettling one, the man who made scenes feel heavier after he entered them. Early roles reflected this perception. In Scent of a Woman, 1992, he played a privileged, arrogant student, detestable, precise, unforgettable in a film dominated by Al Pacino. In Boogie Nights, 1997, his Scotty J was tragic, desperate, and painfully human, a supporting role on paper, a psychological centerpiece on screen. Hoffman didn't steal scenes by demanding attention. He absorbed them. Once he appeared, the emotional temperature changed. By the late 1990s, Hoffman had become something dangerous in Hollywood. Indispensable without being marketable. Directors trusted him. Studios didn't know what to do with him. He wasn't handsome enough to sell romance. He wasn't charismatic in a conventional way. He didn't play heroes. What he did instead was destabilize narratives. His characters exposed the lies other characters told themselves. That ability came at a cost. Hoffman wasn't playing these people from the outside. He was letting them live inside him. And he never learned how to fully ask them to leave. While peers built careers by refining a brand, Hoffman rejected branding entirely. He refused leading man trajectories. He chose parts based on internal resonance rather than visibility. Films like Happiness, The Talented Mr. Ripley, and 25th Hour showcase his range, but more importantly, they revealed his obsession with moral discomfort. He was drawn to characters who failed socially, sexually, emotionally, men who wanted connection but didn't know how to ask for it, men who understood their own damage but felt powerless to change it. This was not accidental. Hoffman had discovered early that discomfort was where he felt most in control. Playing emotionally broken characters gave him structure. Pain became predictable, manageable, safe. Success, on the other hand, introduced uncertainty. Praise created expectations. Expectations created fear. And fear threatened the fragile balance he had built between his inner chaos and external discipline. Behind the scenes, Hoffman's sobriety was already a conscious battle. He had entered rehab in his early 20s and committed himself to staying clean. For years, he succeeded. Work helped. Routine helped. Theater helped most of all. On stage, he felt anchored, present, necessary. But film success complicated things. With recognition came distance. With distance came isolation. And isolation had always been the environment where his demons spoke the loudest. Hoffman's own path was not a straight line forward. It was a deliberate narrowing. He avoided comfort. He avoided ease. He avoided roles that might have softened him. In interviews, he spoke cautiously about fame, often deflecting praise, redirecting attention to the work. But privately, something else was forming, a belief that his value depended on constant emotional excavation, that if he stopped digging, he would disappear. This belief didn't make him reckless. It made him meticulous. He worked harder, prepared longer, pushed deeper. Each performance became proof that he still deserved to exist. By the early 2000s, Hoffman was everywhere, yet nowhere at the center. Critics called him the best actor of his generation long before awards did. Directors trusted him with emotional weight others couldn't carry. He had become the actor who could hold the darkness of a story without blinking. And while that reputation elevated him professionally, it quietly reinforced the most dangerous idea of all, that suffering was not a phase to outgrow, but a tool to sharpen. This is where the trajectory becomes irreversible. Hoffman didn't stumble into his path. He carved it intentionally. He chose invisibility over myth, discomfort over safety, emotional truth over self-preservation. Hollywood didn't force him into the shadows. He walked there willingly, believing that was where his power lived. And for a long time, he was right. The work deepened. The respect grew. The foundation solidified. But beneath the discipline, beneath the restraint, beneath the carefully controlled sobriety, the cost was accumulating. Hoffman was building a career that required constant access to pain, while denying himself any language for healing. He was becoming exceptional at portraying broken men, without ever learning how to stop being one. By the time he stood on the edge of true stardom, the path he had chosen left him nowhere to retreat. And the closer he came to recognition, the more trapped he felt by the very identity that made him great. That tension, the collision between mastery and survival, was about to define the rest of his life. By the time Capote entered production, Philip Seymour Hoffman had already spent more than a decade proving himself quietly. He was respected, trusted, and admired within the industry, but still largely invisible to the public. Capote was supposed to be another carefully chosen role, not a turning point. Hoffman did not chase the film. The film came to him because no one else was willing to go where it required. From the beginning, Hoffman understood that playing Truman Capote was not about imitation. It was about surrender. Capote was not a character to be performed. He was a presence to be inhabited. Hoffman altered his voice, not temporarily, but so deeply that it strained his vocal cords. He lost significant weight. He adjusted his posture, his breathing, his physical center, more dangerously. He allowed Capote's moral ambiguity to seep into his own emotional framework. He didn't judge the man. He carried him, and once carried, Capote did not leave easily. The performance was devastating in its precision. Critics struggled to describe it without sounding excessive. There was no showmanship, no obvious transformation designed to impress. The performance worked because it was restrained, unsettling, and eerily controlled. In 2006, Philip Seymour Hoffman won the Academy Award for Best Actor. At 38 years old, he had reached the highest possible recognition in his field. On stage, holding the Oscar, Hoffman did not look triumphant. He looked careful, almost cautious, as if aware that something irreversible had just happened. Because what followed the win was not relief. It was fear. Hoffman later admitted that after Capote, he felt exposed. The Oscar did not validate him. It fixed an expectation to his name. From that point forward, every role would be measured against a moment he could never repeat. Success had taken away the anonymity that once protected him. He was no longer just a working actor. He was now a symbol of excellence. And symbols are not allowed to falter. Instead of choosing lighter roles, Hoffman moved further inward. He gravitated toward characters that mirrored his growing anxiety. In doubt, he played a priest suffocating under moral suspicion. In Synecdoche, New York, He portrayed a man attempting to control an entire artificial world while losing control of himself. In The Master, his performance as Lancaster Dodd was both commanding and hollow, charismatic and deeply fragile. These were not career moves. They were psychological continuations. Colleagues noticed a shift. Hoffman was still disciplined, still generous on set, still deeply professional, but there was an intensity that no longer turned off. He prepared obsessively. He overanalyzed. He held himself to impossible internal standards. The question that haunted him was not whether he could act. It was whether he could ever be ordinary again. Publicly, Hoffman downplayed his success. He avoided red carpets. He deflected praise. Privately, the pressure accumulated. The Oscar had changed the relationship between his work and his identity. Before, acting had been something he did. Now, it was something he had to protect at all costs. Failure was no longer personal. It was existential. This period of his life is often described as his golden era, and professionally, that is true. He was nominated for multiple Academy Awards. He worked with the most respected directors of his generation. His reputation solidified into something almost mythic, but internally, the structure that had kept him stable for years began to fracture. Hoffman believed that his ability to access pain was what made him great. The Oscar did not challenge that belief. It confirmed it, and once confirmed, the belief became a requirement. Each role had to hurt. Each performance had to cost something. Rest became suspicious. Ease felt dangerous. If the work stopped demanding suffering, what would be left of him? This was the paradox of his peak. The higher he climbed, the narrower his emotional margin became. The discipline that once supported his sobriety now fed his anxiety. The admiration he received isolated him further. People praised the work, not the man. And Hoffman, who had spent his life learning how to disappear, complied without protest. From the outside, this was the moment everything went right. From the inside, it was the moment the exit doors began to close. Hoffman had reached the summit, but the summit offered no shelter, only exposure. And exposure, for someone who survived by controlling emotional distance, was unbearable. The Oscar did not break Philip Seymour Hoffman. It crystallized him. It locked him into an identity built on endurance, intensity, and silence. The world celebrated his brilliance, unaware that brilliance had just become a burden he could not set down. What came next was not a sudden collapse. It was a slow, quiet erosion, and by the time the cracks became visible, the damage was already done. Philip Seymour Hoffman did not collapse when he relapsed. That is the part most people misunderstand. His collapse happened long before the drugs returned. The relapse was only the visible symptom of something that had been eroding quietly for years. By the early 2010s, Hoffman had achieved everything he once believed would make him safe. Respect, stability, mastery, legacy. And yet, none of it addressed the fear that had followed him since childhood. The fear of being empty without pain. For more than 2 decades, Hoffman stayed sober through discipline, routine, work, control. Sobriety was not a transformation for him. It was a maintenance system. He didn't romanticize recovery. He treated it like a responsibility. But discipline requires structure, and structure requires balance. As his career intensified after the Oscar, that balance disappeared. The work no longer coexisted with his identity. It consumed it. Hoffman's schedule became relentless. Film sets, theater rehearsals, press obligations he quietly resented. He moved between worlds without ever fully resting in one. The roles he chose demanded total immersion, psychological, emotional, physical. And while audiences saw range and brilliance, Hoffman experienced something else, depletion. Each performance took something he did not know how to replenish. There was no language in his life for recovery that didn't feel like weakness. What made this phase especially dangerous was how functional everything appeared. Hoffman showed up. He delivered. He remained precise, present, and terrifyingly effective on screen. There were no public meltdowns, no scandals, no obvious warning signs. To the outside world, he was thriving. Internally, he was negotiating with a growing panic that he had built a life requiring constant emotional excavation. with no permission to stop digging. Friends later recalled subtle changes. He became more withdrawn, more guarded, less willing to talk about how he was actually doing. He listened more than he spoke. The same survival instinct that once helped him observe others now isolated him from them. He had learned long ago that visibility carried risk. At this stage of his life, invisibility felt safer than honesty. Hoffman's greatest fear during this period was not relapse. It was mediocrity. He worried that without constant pressure, his work would soften, that his instincts would dull, that peace would make him ordinary. This belief was never stated publicly, but it shaped every decision he made. He chose roles that mirrored his internal state: men obsessed with control, men losing grip on identity, men hiding fragility behind authority. These were not accidents. They were rehearsals. By 2012, the internal tension reached a breaking point. Hoffman began experimenting again, quietly, carefully, not with the recklessness of his youth, but with the calculated secrecy of someone who believed he could manage it. The relapse was not a surrender. It was an attempt at regulation, a way to control anxiety, silence the noise, regain a sense of command over his emotional terrain. The problem was that control had always been the illusion. Hoffman did not tell most people what was happening. He continued to work, continued to parent, continued to function. On the surface, nothing collapsed. Beneath it, everything did. Each use reinforced the same cycle he had known before. Relief followed by shame, calm followed by dread. And with every repetition, the distance between who he was on screen and who he felt himself to be off-screen widened. What made this relapse particularly lethal was the timing. Hoffman was no longer a young man searching for identity. He was a figure others relied on, a father, a leader on set, a benchmark for artistic integrity. The pressure to maintain that image compounded the secrecy. Asking for help felt like betrayal, not of others, but the version of himself he had constructed to survive. By 2013, Hoffman knew he was losing ground. He entered treatment again, briefly. He spoke to a few people. He acknowledged the danger in measured tones. But even recovery had become something he approached intellectually rather than emotionally. He scheduled it. He managed it. What he did not do was surrender control. And without surrender, the fear remained intact. The darkest part of this period is not that Hoffman relapsed. It is that he believed he had to face it alone. He had built a career on self-reliance, emotional endurance, and silence. Those same traits now worked against him. The man who could embody brokenness with terrifying accuracy could not admit his own without feeling erased. This was not yet the end, but it was the point of no return. Hoffman had entered a phase where the tools that once kept him alive began to undo him. And the closer he came to losing control, the harder he tried to tighten his grip. The system was cracking, quietly, precisely, fatally. After leaving treatment in 2013, Philip Seymour Hoffman did not spiral publicly. He did not disappear. He did not unravel in ways people recognize as crisis. Instead, he returned to work. That choice, more than anything else, sealed his fate. Work had always been his stabilizer, his alibi, his proof that he was still functional. But this time, work was no longer an anchor. It was camouflage. Hoffman resumed using heroin, now mixed with fentanyl, a combination exponentially more lethal than what he had known in his youth. This was not ignorance. It was risk tolerance shaped by years of believing he could endure anything if he stayed controlled. He did not use to escape reality. He used to manage it, to slow the internal noise, to soften the relentless pressure of expectation, to feel briefly regulated in a life that no longer allowed him balance. Those close to him noticed fragments, not patterns. Fatigue, absence, a subtle detachment that was easy to misinterpret as focus. Hoffman was still present with his children, still reliable on set, still meticulous in preparation. This is what made intervention so difficult. He had mastered the art of functioning while disintegrating. And because he never performed chaos, no one recognized how close he was to collapse. The psychology of this period is crucial. Hoffman did not believe he deserved destruction. He believed he could survive it. He had built his identity around endurance. Pain was familiar territory. Vulnerability was not. Asking for help meant surrendering the illusion of control that had defined his adult life. And without control, he feared there would be nothing left of him. By early 2014, the cycle had narrowed dangerously. Use, relief, shame, isolation, repeat. Each repetition stripped away another layer of resistance. Hoffman was no longer negotiating with addiction. He was negotiating with exhaustion. His system, emotional, psychological, physical, was depleted, but he continued forward because stopping felt more dangerous than continuing. On February 2nd, 2014, Philip Seymour Hoffman was alone in his Manhattan apartment. The details are clinical. The door was locked. A syringe was found in his arm. Multiple packets of heroin were present, some labeled by strength, an indication not of recklessness, but of calculation. Fentanyl was later identified as the primary cause of death. He was 46 years old. What matters is not the mechanics of that final moment. What matters is the context. Hoffman did not die because he stopped caring. He died because he had spent a lifetime believing care had to be earned through suffering. He had survived for decades by managing pain, controlling exposure, and refusing to collapse visibly. In the end, that strategy left him alone at the moment he needed connection most. There was no note, no message, no symbolic gesture. That absence is not accidental. Hoffman did not see himself as a tragic figure. He did not frame his life as a warning. He was simply trying one last time to regulate an internal state that had become unmanageable. The fatal dose was not an expression of despair. It was a miscalculation made by a man who believed he could still hold the line. Hollywood reacted with shock. Tributes flooded in. Words like genius, irreplaceable, and greatest of his generation dominated headlines. But those words arrived too late to matter. They celebrated the output, not the cost, the performances, not the price paid to deliver them. Hoffman had spent his life giving audiences access to the most uncomfortable corners of human experience. When it came time to confront his own, there was no audience, only silence. The darkest truth of Philip Seymour Hoffman's collapse is not that addiction returned. It is that the system around him rewarded endurance and ignored erosion. His brilliance was visible. His suffering was not. And because he never asked to be saved, no one recognized how urgently he needed to be. This was not a sudden ending. It was a slow, logical conclusion to a life built on the belief that pain was productive and rest was dangerous. Hoffman did not lose control in one moment. He lost it gradually, quietly, while appearing entirely intact. By the time the world realized he was gone, he had already been disappearing for years. In the final years of his life, Philip Seymour Hoffman was not giving up. That detail is often erased by the simplicity of the ending, but it matters. What followed his relapse was not surrender, but resistance. Quiet, imperfect, and tragically insufficient. Hoffman was still trying to live. He just didn't know how to do it without returning to the tools that once kept him functional. One of the clearest signs of this resistance was his decision to accept a role in the Hunger Games franchise. On the surface, it seemed like a commercial detour, a rare step into blockbuster territory for an actor who had spent his career avoiding spectacle. But for Hoffman, the role of Plutarch Heavensbee represented something else entirely. It offered structure, predictability, a defined boundary between character and self. Unlike his previous roles, this one did not require emotional excavation. It required control, distance, calculation. And for a man drowning in internal chaos, that distance felt like relief. At the same time, Hoffman was making deliberate efforts to reconnect with what had once stabilized him most: theater. He returned to the stage, directing and performing in productions that demanded presence rather than perfection. Theater grounded him. It imposed routine. It forced him into shared space rather than isolation. Colleagues noticed that on stage, Hoffman seemed calmer, more focused, almost relieved. The applause mattered less than the structure. Being accountable to a live audience anchored him in time. His most genuine attempt at rebirth, however, came through fatherhood. Hoffman had 3 children, and those closest to him insist that he took this role seriously. He was present, attentive, protective. He did not romanticize himself as a tragic artist at home. He tried to be normal. He tried to be steady. But fatherhood also intensified his fear. The stakes were no longer abstract. Failure no longer belonged only to him. The pressure to remain functional, to not collapse, grew heavier. During this period, Hoffman spoke occasionally about recovery, but always in controlled language. He acknowledged difficulty without exposing vulnerability. He framed struggle as something being managed rather than endured. This distinction mattered. Managing implied control. Enduring implied surrender. And surrender remained intolerable. Even in moments when he reached for help, he did so cautiously, as if afraid that honesty might dismantle the identity he had built to survive. There were warning signs, but they were subtle. Weight loss, fatigue, emotional distance that could easily be mistaken for focus. Hoffman did not perform distress in ways that demanded intervention. He was still working, still meeting obligations, still delivering excellence, in a system conditioned to equate productivity with stability. This made him invisible. He did not collapse loudly enough to be saved. The tragedy of this phase lies in its near misses. There were moments when Hoffman stepped back, moments when he recalibrated, moments when survival seemed possible. But each attempt at rebirth was undermined by the same internal contradiction. He wanted relief without exposure, healing without vulnerability, control without cost. And those equations do not balance. Hoffman's return to work was not denial. It was hope. Hope that discipline could still save him. Hope that routine could restore equilibrium. Hope that he could rebuild without dismantling the structures that had defined him. But the deeper truth was that those structures were already compromised. The tools he relied on, work, control, silence, were no longer neutral. They had become part of the problem. In the weeks leading up to his death, Hoffman continued moving forward. He made plans. He showed up. He did not behave like someone preparing to disappear. That is what makes the ending so devastating. There was no dramatic farewell, because there was no conscious goodbye. There was only a man trying, one last time, to hold himself together using methods that no longer worked. This was the final paradox of Philip Seymour Hoffman's life. He was capable of extraordinary transformation on screen, yet unable to grant himself the same permission off it. He understood brokenness intimately, but could not accept his own without judgment. The rebirth he sought required surrender, and surrender was the one role he never learned how to play. By the time the world recognized the fragility of his condition, Hoffman had already crossed the threshold where effort alone could no longer compensate for exhaustion. The turning point came. The attempt was made. But rebirth demands more than discipline. It demands exposure. And that remained the one thing he could not risk. What followed was not failure of will, but failure of language. Hoffman did not lack strength. He lacked a way to ask for help that did not feel like erasure. And so the story moved quietly towards inevitable conclusion. Philip Seymour Hoffman's death did not arrive with spectacle. It arrived with interruption. Production stopped. Sets went quiet. Conversations froze mid-sentence. The industry reacted the way it always does when someone indispensable disappears, by realizing too late how much had been resting on one person's shoulders. Tributes followed immediately. Directors, actors, critics reached for the same words. Genius, irreplaceable, the greatest of his generation. The language was sincere. It was also incomplete. What Hoffman left behind was not just a body of work. It was a recalibration of what acting could be. He did not redefine performance through transformation alone, but through presence. He showed that an actor did not need beauty, charm, or myth to command attention. He needed truth, precision, and the courage to remain uncomfortable. Hoffman's legacy is built on characters who refuse to reassure the audience. Men who expose weakness, contradiction, and moral ambiguity without apology. In the years following his death, his performances did not age. They sharpened. Roles that once felt unsettling began to feel prophetic. Synecdoche, New York became less abstract and more autobiographical. The master read not just as a study of power, but of fragility masked as control. Even his smallest roles gained weight. Viewers noticed how often Hoffman played men trying to hold systems together, while quietly unraveling inside them. The pattern was no longer invisible. For younger actors, Hoffman became a reference point rather than a blueprint. His career was admired, but rarely imitated fully. There was an unspoken understanding that his method came at a cost. Teachers spoke about his discipline. Directors spoke about his generosity. But privately, many acknowledged that Hoffman's greatness was inseparable from his self-erasure. He gave everything to the work, often leaving nothing behind for himself. The industry also confronted an uncomfortable question it could not easily answer. How does a system that celebrates vulnerability on screen remain so poor at protecting it off-screen? Hoffman was surrounded by admiration, opportunity, and respect. What he lacked was space to be unfinished, space to rest, space to fail quietly without consequence. His death did not expose a lack of talent or resilience. It exposed a culture that rewards endurance while ignoring erosion. For his family, legacy was simpler and heavier. He left 3 children who inherited not a myth, but an absence. Hoffman had tried to separate his work from his home life, but the demands of his craft inevitably followed him. Those closest to him described a man who loved deeply, but struggled to remain present without structure. The tragedy is not that he lacked love. It is that love alone could not compete with the internal systems he used to survive. Over time, Hollywood moved on. It always does. New performances emerged. New talents were crowned. But Hoffman's absence remained noticeable in a specific way. There was no replacement. Not because no one else was talented, but because no one else occupied that exact emotional territory. Hoffman had specialized in the unsellable parts of humanity, and once gone, those spaces felt quieter. His legacy ultimately resists simplification. He is not a cautionary tale about addiction alone. He is not proof that brilliance requires suffering. He is evidence of something more unsettling, that a person can be profoundly gifted, deeply respected, and still fundamentally alone in their struggle. Hoffman did not die because he lacked strength. He died because strength was the only language he allowed himself to speak. What remains is a body of work that continues to confront audiences with discomfort rather than comfort, performances that do not resolve neatly, characters that do not seek forgiveness. In an industry built on illusion, Hoffman insisted on truth, even when that truth offered no redemption. And perhaps that is the most enduring part of his legacy. Not the awards, not the acclaim, but the refusal to lie about what it means to be human. Philip Seymour Hoffman was not destroyed by addiction alone. He was undone by a belief system that told him pain was proof of worth, and control was the only form of safety. He spent his life mastering the art of endurance, convincing himself that as long as he could hold everything together, nothing truly needed to change. That belief made him extraordinary. It also made him alone. Hollywood did not fail him by ignoring his talent. It failed him by rewarding his silence, by applauding performances without asking what they cost, by mistaking functionality for health. Hoffman became a symbol of artistic integrity because he never asked to be spared. And in a system that only intervenes when collapse is loud, that restraint became lethal. There is no simple lesson here. Not that genius requires suffering. Not that fame destroys everyone it touches. The truth is less comforting. Some people learn early that survival depends on disappearing, on managing pain quietly, on never needing too much. When those people succeed, the habits that kept them alive become invisible liabilities. Hoffman did not need to be saved from his talent. He needed permission to be unfinished, to rest without disappearing, to be valued without enduring. In the end, his life leaves us with an uncomfortable question, one that has no easy answer. How many people are celebrated for what they give, while quietly vanishing for who they are? Philip Seymour Hoffman did not lose control in a single moment. He held it for too long.